Gaza City are sifting through the rubble of destroyed buildings for victims following Israeli airstrikes. Gaza's health ministry says at least 687 Palestinians have been killed and close to 4,000 wounded in Israeli airstrikes on the blockaded enclave since Saturday. Apartment blocks, a mosque and hospitals were among the sites attacked. Roads and houses were also destroyed. Israeli TV channels say the death toll from the Hamas attack had climbed to 900 in the country, with at least 2,600 people injured and dozens taken captive. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will use enormous force against Hamas militants. He says the retaliation for the worst attack on Israel's soil has only just begun. Over 1,000 people have died on both sides since the first attack on Saturday. During a televised address yesterday, Netanyahu recounted how some Israelis were killed during the assault.
The savage attacks that Hamas perpetrated against innocent Israelis are mind-boggling, slaughtering families in their homes, massacring hundreds of young people at an outdoor festival, kidnapping scores of women, children, and elderly, even Holocaust survivors. Hamas terrorists bound, burned, and executed children. They are savages. Hamas is ISIS. And just as the forces of civilizations united to defeat ISIS, the forces of civilization must support Israel in defeating Hamas.
Well, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres says hostilities between Israel and Palestine will worsen the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip.
I recognize the legitimate grievances of the Palestinian people. But nothing can justify these acts of terror and the killing, maiming and abduction of civilians. I reiterate my call to immediately cease these attacks and release all hostages. While I recognize Israel's legitimate security concerns, I also remind Israel that military operations must be conducted in strict accordance with international humanitarian law. Civilians must be respected and protected at all times. Civilian infrastructure must never be a target. I am deeply distressed by today's announcement that Israel will initiate a complete siege of the Gaza Strip, nothing allowed in, no electricity, food or fuel. The humanitarian situation in Gaza was extremely dire before these hostilities. Now it will only deteriorate exponentially.
We're now joined by Avi Melamed, independent Middle East strategic intelligence expert, and Moteya Abu Masbeh, media and political activist in Gaza. Thank you very much to both our guests for your time this afternoon. Avi, perhaps let's start with you, because Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel says that the Middle East will change forever. What do you read into that?
Well, my understanding is that we are looking at a mega event. This is a pivotal moment. The war that Hamas and Islamic Jihad waged on Israel, the atrocities conducted and the scale of the atrocities. This is a moment, this is a pivotal moment. And I think that one of the things that I'm trying to understand, according to Mr. Netanyahu's statement, is that Israel is now going to change its strategy vis-a-vis the challenge of Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza Strip. Islamic Jihad in Gaza Strip became actually a base of Iran, bordering Israel, and that base has been constantly launching attacks on Israel in the service of the Iranian interest, while the Hamas and Islamic Jihad both are sacrificing their own brothers in Gaza Strip as well as Israeli civilians in Israel. This has been going on for many years. The following the recent attack of Hamas and Islamic Jihad is a totally different story. Apparently, Israel is determined to change the ground rules in Gaza Strip. Apparently, Israel is determined to crush Hamas and Islamic Jihad military capacities. And by doing that, Israel will basically eliminate the Iranian base that was established next to its border. Limiting this Iranian base is a good news for the people of Israel and for Palestinians, because once this base is going to be eradicated, Iran will not have the ability to continue to play the flames as it used to do so far. and it could not be able to dictate constant instability. Eradicating the base in Gaza Strip that is an Iranian proxy, Hamas and Islamic Jihad, is an ultimate interest not only of Israel, it's an ultimate interest of the Palestinians, it's ultimate interest of the people of the Middle East.
When you are speaking of good news and the best interest of Palestinians as well as Israelis, rather, just a note also to yourself and to our viewers that our guest, Motea, media and political activist who would have joined us from Gaza, has since pulled out of the interview. But when you speak of this being good news, the crushing of what you have called an Iranian base being good for Palestinians as well, what do we need to understand about Hamas and why it is being labeled a terrorist organization? As we understand it from those we have spoken to in the country, they were elected.
Hamas is an Islamic militant organization. It is a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas ideologically, formally committed to the elimination of the State of Israel. Hamas is not interested in compromising with Israel. He is not interested in concessions. He is not interested in dialoguing. This is Hamas' formal position, and obviously it's being backed by Hamas atrocities on the ground. Hamas took over Gaza Strip in 2007, eliminating the rule of the Palestinian Authority. Their own brothers in Gaza Strip, viciously. Hundreds of Palestinians were killed and executed by Hamas back then in 2007. Hamas since then dragged Gaza Strip to a misery. The Arab world, the Palestinians themselves have criticized Hamas enormously for his responsibility for the gloomy reality of the people of Gaza Strip. In recent years, Israel has gave dozens and dozens of thousands of people from Gaza Strip the permits to go to Israel and to work, to provide their families. Hamas, instead of recognizing that, instead of understanding that this is an opportunity to help the people of Gaza, Hamas reciprocate Israel with this brutal attack on Israeli civilians. Hamas is a very dangerous entity. And one more thing about Hamas. Hamas has a 35,000 militant personnel. This is a military, well-structured organization, trained, armed, financed by the Iranians. Hamas leaders are acknowledging that formally. Islamic Jihad in Palestine, the same thing. We are looking at two major radical Islam militant groups that are basically want to dictate the trajectory of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict according to their radical ideology and according to the needs and interests of the Iranians' interests. This is why.
Very quickly,
this is why eliminating Hamas and Islamic Jihad rule in Gaza Strip is the ultimate interest not only of Israelis, also of Palestinians and any other person in the Middle East that is looking for stability and future of hope.
Very quickly for us, you have mentioned that Hamas is not interested in compromise or dialogue. Is Israel interested in compromise and dialogue? And if you would please indulge me, I see behind you or right next to you that you've got your television set on and you're watching the news. What is the headline at this hour in Israel?
Well, Duduzile, obviously everyone is tuned to the news. Lots of reports coming in. The most recent thing coming up from Israel, the number of fatalities right now in Israel is about 900 people and expect, unfortunately, to rise. Number of people injured because of the Hamas attack is 2,000 people. Israel is conducting massive attacks in Gaza Strip. Those attacks are expected to be widened in the next couple of days when Israel apparently preparing a massive ground operation. Israeli Minister of Defense says that Israel is going to change the reality in Gaza Strip for the next 50 years. Obviously, you can understand this. This is a very sad and tragic situation. I feel bad for, both innocent people, of course, in the Israeli side as well as Palestinians. And that's the reason why I'm really reiterating what I think is the most significant thing to understand. In order to offer both Israelis and Palestinians a chance, a hope, a future, the Iranian base that was created in Gaza Strip, based upon Islamic Jihad and Hamas, that Iranian base has to be eradicated. Once it's going to be eradicated, this is a totally new reality that will enable Israelis and Palestinians to dictate a much more positive, constructive trajectory for their conflict. It's important to understand that.
What's in it for Iran?
Iran has a very simple interest it wants to fuel the Israeli-Palestinian flames, because fueling the Israeli-Palestinian flame, the conflict of the Israelis and Palestinians, was one of the major cards that helped Iran to market itself to the Arab world as allegedly the defender of the Palestinians. The Iranians know that the issue of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a very much present issue in the Arab mindset, political discussion, and so on and so on. The Iranians very skillfully took that issue and used it as a pawn, as a card, to basically advance their own hegemonic vision in the region. Under this banner, the Iranian regime was able to take Lebanon hostage through the Hezbollah. Under this banner, the Iranian regime entrenched himself in Iraq, in Yemen, in Syria, using that slogan. The same applies as of Gaza Strip. Iran has sacrificed gladly Palestinians, Israelis, Lebanese, Syrians, and so on and so on.
I do beg your pardon,
the
Avi.
continuation of the conflict is a major interest.
We are 2 minutes to the end of the show. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Avi Melamed, independent Middle East strategic intelligence expert. And just a note to our viewers that we had set up a media and political activist in Gaza who since could not be able to join us. More news for you in a few moments.